The two things you definitely need to track if you want to lose weight and build muscle. The third bonus one, and then there's a fourth one that's not as important as well. So when I first started personal training over 10 years ago now, I'd be getting my clients to track everything, because if you're not assessing, you're guessing. But if tracking your nutrition is new to you, then we want to try and make it as simple as possible, especially if you're trying to lose weight, because the more things for us to focus on, the more things that could go wrong. So it's really important we identify the main and most important thing we need to track if we want to lose weight, but then the other things that are going to help out in terms of retaining and potentially building muscle mass. I also like to look at it from health and longevity as well, so making sure that we're getting enough vitamins and minerals in this diet. And then the final one is one that's just a bit of an extra and it doesn't matter too much. So let's go through what I like to call the nutritional hierarchy for fat loss. So number one, and the most important thing you need to track if you want to lose weight, and I'm sure you can have already guessed it by now, is calories. So if you are in a calorie deficit, you will lose weight. If you are at calorie maintenance, you will maintain your weight. And if you're in a calorie surplus, you will gain weight. It's as simple as that. Yet we like to try and overcomplicate it. Now, in order to determine what your calories are to be in a calorie deficit, you've got two different ways you can do it. So you've got the first one using a calorie calculator, which there's lots online, I'm sure you can find them. Or if you've not already seen yet, there's the fat loss reset, which is tagged in the comments below, which you can actually use my calorie calculator as well. So if you scroll down to the description, you'll see the fat loss reset, sign up for that and I'll send you out my calorie calculator. The second option, and my preferred option though, is the 14-day calorie tracking method, where you would track your calories for 14 days. So for 2 weeks, you record your weekly average weight from week 1 to week 2. And then depending on whether you've lost, maintained or gained weight, you will be able to calculate your maintenance calories should be, and then from there can set a calorie deficit. In order for us to lose half a kilo or 1 pound a week, we need to be burning around 3,500 calories. Usually we look to set a calorie deficit at around 500 calories per day to begin with. And that's what you will do from being in your calorie deficit. Now, some people like to go more aggressive with that, but tracking your calories is the most important thing for losing weight, which is why I recommend anybody who's trying to lose weight should definitely be tracking that. One more thing I'll add to that as well, which I'll say is that try and set yourself a target of being within 100 calories of your calorie target on a daily basis. So let's say your calorie deficit number is 1800, you want to be somewhere between 17 and 1900 on a daily basis, because there's not often where you're going to hit 1800 exactly. Okay, so that's calories. We're going to move on to number 2. So remember, the most important thing and the only thing you actually need to track if you want to lose weight is your calories. However, if you're watching this video, the likelihood is you are interested in building muscle or you're interested in the gym. So the next thing we need to track in order to retain and potentially build muscle mass as well is protein, if you hadn't already guessed it. Now, if you're new to training or new to the gym, so long as you are consistent for the first 6 months, even being in a calorie deficit, the likelihood is you will build some muscle mass. And you can build muscle mass being in a calorie deficit, but as you become more and more experience with your training and your training age increases, it becomes harder and harder in order to build muscle mass when you're in a calorie deficit, because we need a surplus amount of calories in order for us to be building muscle, and we need to make sure that we're training at the right amount of volume. So training is the main stimulus for building muscle, but protein will allow us to build that muscle so long as we get our protein target right. Now, in terms of setting a protein target, I always like to set protein when in a calorie deficit somewhere between 1.8 to 2.35 grams per kilo in body weight. Now, yes, there has been research over the last 10-15 years saying that people still can build muscle mass at 1.5 grams per kilo in body weight. And I'm certainly not disputing that. However, I would always urge, especially if you're on a calorie deficit, just going a little bit higher with that protein intake, which is why I'd always try and set somebody at the lower end of around 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight in terms of protein, if tracking your nutrition is new to you and you're just getting used to eating a lot more protein. However, for most people, I would probably set it at around at least 2 grams per kilo. And then if you are a little bit more advanced with your training, I'd probably be setting it around 2.35 grams per kilo in body weight. But again, I wouldn't go crazy above these numbers as well, because especially if you are dieting, we don't want to be thinking about eating lots and lots of protein. Yes, it will help with retaining muscle mass, but there does get to a point where when we start getting in excess of certain numbers, that I would rather use those that calorie allowance towards carbohydrates so we've got more energy. Okay, number 3. So the first one, the most important thing we need to track in order for us to lose weight. The second one, protein to make sure that we are retaining and potentially building muscle mass as well, so long as our training is correct. The third one isn't tracked by many people, but I liked it in terms of health and longevity, and that is fiber or dietary fiber. Now, the reason why I say to track this is because if we look at the foods that are typically high in fiber, it's your fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, foods that contain a lot of vitamins and minerals. And what I typically tend to see happen is when we don't set a fiber target, it can become easy to fall into that trap of just filling our calories with ice cream and chocolate and protein shakes. But obviously, if you're watching this, you wouldn't do that. So by having that fiber target there and setting it at 14 grams every 1,000 calories, it allows us to make sure that we're getting lots of fruit and vegetables in our diet. And the health benefits associated with fiber are immense as well. It's important for gut health and function, decreases cardiovascular disease, and there's just a whole host of benefits from having a diet high in fiber. So I would definitely always recommend tracking your fiber intake. In terms of dieting as well, foods that are typically high in fiber are what we call high voluminous low calorie foods, which means that we can eat a big bulk of them and they're going to fill us up for a long time. Like, fiber is very, very important for making you feel fuller. So if you're dieting, then we want to be trying to eat as many of these foods as we can so that we're eating a lot of food volume for a lot of low calories. If we take, for example, let's say like broccoli, well, if you were to eat 150, 200 grams of broccoli, that is a lot of food volume for low calories. But if you were to compare that to a bit of cheese, for example, cheese is a very small amount and very calorie dense. So try and get a diet that's high in fiber, not only for the health benefits, but in terms of keeping you full. Okay, now the last one. So this is why I've left this one till last. If you are trying to lose weight, these are the most important ones to track, and that is carbohydrates and fats. So I actually, for a lot of my weight loss clients, will only set a calorie, protein and a fiber target. And then by not tracking carbs or fats, it allows them to flip-flop between the two and have more flexibility in the diet. Because carbohydrates and fats don't play an important role in terms of body composition. So just having that flexibility and freedom to be able to on some days have a higher fat intake or a higher carbohydrate intake can be really important. Especially if you're going out for meals or having social activities where you want to have some flexibility and freedom in your diet, then I think it's always wise to just track your calories, protein, and then fiber, and then you've got carbs and fats there that you can just flip-flop between the two. However, on that, if you are dieting and you are a performance athlete, so let's say you do CrossFit, then I probably would look at tracking your carbohydrates and fat, and I would look at making sure that you're getting lots of carbohydrates in there so you're fueling your activity as well. But if you are just a regular gym goer, then I'd probably just look at your calories, protein, fiber, and then just flip-flop between carbohydrates and fats. Now, the reason why I did want to speak about this is because last video I did calorie cycling. So what I would say with this is as well, the nutritional hierarchy for fat loss here, when you do have meals out or social events on, you can also change these around and manipulate some of these as well, which is what I often get my clients to do. So let's say I was going to go out for a meal Saturday night and I didn't want to go over my calorie target. I knew that on that day I could not go over my calories, but it'd mean not hitting my protein. Then that day I might say to that person, right then, just look at hitting your calorie target and don't worry about your fiber target. So it's a very important tool to use, the nutritional hierarchy for fat loss, because I always like to say, look, calories is the most important thing that we're going to be tracking. It's then protein and fiber, and then obviously you can flip-flop between your carbs and fats. They don't play too much of an important role in terms of body composition. If you are going for a meal out and you know that for that meal, it means that you wouldn't have to go over your calories if you just sacrifice protein and fiber, then you can do that for the odd day. That's absolutely fine. But it's always important for us to be tracking calories, which is why I strongly recommend using the nutritional hierarchy for fat loss.